it's 1%, that's the specific one that you're looking at is among the 1% best rated wine for that particular category, which is, for example, Napa Valley Cab, and at a specific price point.
You're listening to the Vint Podcast, bringing you expert interviews, alternative market insights, and exclusive access to the world of wine and spirits investing. Enjoy the show.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Vint Podcast. I'm here with Billy, who rarely spends time in the United States anymore. He's been in Canada and Mexico most recently.
Yep,
How you doing?
I'm our latest ambassador for NAFTA, or whatever Trump replaced it with. Just making sure the North American trade agreements are all in place.
Yeah, the wine in Napa versus the wine in Canada. What's the main comparison if we had to put them on a Venn diagram?
The main comparison? Are you talking about the most similar?
Differences.
Differences, yeah. No, I would say wine in Napa. Everybody knows what Napa is known for. Like riper, fruit-forward, rich Cabernets, I guess. Cabernet Sauvignon. And
Canada and Mexico.
Oh, you said California. You said Napa.
No, Canada. Oh, did I really? Canada and Mexico.
I was like, that's a weird question. Okay.
Yeah, Cabernet is from Napa. Learning a lot on the Vint Podcast. Tune in each week.
Yeah, there we go. Canada and Mexico couldn't be more different. Canada has a lot of cool climate, cooler grapes. Mexico is really unique, at least the Valle de Guadalupe where it was, because they grow a lot of red grapes. It's really hot. It's a borderline desert. I always describe it must have been what like Los Angeles was 120 years ago. But what's interesting there is there aren't any set hard and fast rules. I guess Canada follows a little bit of a European tradition just because of its influence, whereas Mexico, the grapes that are grown there, number one, when they're imported, people might have gotten the grapes wrong anyway. So some are called one thing and maybe another. The other is just there's just blends that are all over the place. So you'll have like Cabernet Syrah blend, Cabernet Tempranillo blend, and it's really people just trying to find, because vines have been grown there for hundreds of years. There's a bunch of actual old vines from the mid 1900s. So what they've done now is the quality of the wine was really recognized more in like the 80s and 90s. And then a lot of winemakers, both from Europe and the US, kind of came down and helped them polish a little bit more what they're doing, and more infrastructure has been built up. So it's been really cool. There's a lot of really unique red blends, some cool white wines as well. There's a unique salinity in the soil that kind of makes everything distinctly Valle, and sometimes it works out really well, sometimes it doesn't, but they're still working to find out the essence of Valle in the wines, which is really cool to see. It's kind of happening in real time.
Yeah, what's the coastal influence there? Like just from really long time ago, or do you still get some of that? What's it like?
Like coastal as in the weather-wise?
Yeah. Because you say it's desert mainly, but it's, how cold I guess the nights get really cold, and do you get some of that wind?
Yeah, it's deserty and like scrub brushy and fairly dry and dusty. But again, it's like Los Angeles or even by Paso. There's a little more than that. But you get cool winds and rains from, it's only like, how many kilometers did it say? Like, it's not that far from Ensenada, which is right by the coast. So basically you're getting a similar influence like Santa Barbara, where it's not like completely transverse, but cool and maritime air comes in. It rains during the winter, so that's why it's dry and dusty a little bit in the summertime. But they get enough. I would say it's Mediterranean more than just desert, but definitely dry. And you have to use water well. But like one of my favorite producers, Mina Penelope, and I mainly like them. I've had their wines over the years, but it's basically this lady who was born in the area, went to Australia to learn, polish her winemaking chops, has come back. She married a guy whose family has grown grapes there for years, but he had been in the US and he came back now, and they're working like organically. And she's making really interesting wines, and they dry farm. So it's possible to dry farm as well. Yeah. But there's a lot of old school winemakers who are still doing things conventionally and irrigate the crap out of everything and take all the cover crops off. And so they're still learning.
Sure. Yeah. Cool. Wine destinations for our listeners to go and visit. Certainly a lot going on. Today's episode, apart from recapping travels, we have a lot to review in terms of what's been happening on the Vint platform. As of this recording, we've released and sold out 5 new collections, actually. And announcing and soon to be releasing on Thursday, we'll release this podcast on Wednesday, and new collection will go live on Thursday, will be our 6th offering since last week. So we've had 2 whiskey collections, Balmore and a Macallan offering, and then 3 wine collections, Domaine de la Romanée-Conti, Rousseau, and Cristal Champagne. So it's been certainly getting back on the horse and going quickly with this batch. And we have had a ton of demand on the platform since it's been a little bit since we've launched some collections, which we've talked about on the podcast a little bit. So certainly these offerings aren't quite meeting the demand that we're seeing right now, but that's definitely going to change as we have plenty more collections in the pipeline that will be coming over the next several weeks. And then as we move throughout we'll get back on track in terms of 1 to 3 collections launching each week. And our investors will be able to get plenty of wine here through the end of this quarter.
Yeah.
I was going to go on and talk a little bit about the collection that we have upcoming. I was just going to intro it. Maybe you can talk about it. We have our Tuscan Legends collection, which is one of our first Italian offerings that we've had. Not our first, but it's been a while since we've had an Italian wine collection, since I believe our Piemonte collection early-ish last year. Is that right? Probably about this time.
No,
actually.
we've had a Brunello. We've had a Brunello collection since
before. 2 Italian collections.
We've had 3 total, I think. We've had the Super Tuscan was like our our 3rd ever collection. And then we had our Piemonte.
That's right. Brunello, 43,000. That's right.
And we had our Brunello. Yeah. Don't worry, Brady. My job is more to keep track of the wines. Yours is to keep track of the people who invest in the wines.
We're at a good place now because I remember when it was 10 collections and you could list them off really easily.
Yeah, we've progressed and like working with Adam, and also we've installed a bunch of inventory management things over the past months and in quarters. So I've been intimately involved in moving our specific wines from place to place on data sheets. So if you have any questions, let me know.
You want to tell the folks about this upcoming one?
Yeah, and I wanted to highlight again. I guess looking back is nice because our first Italian collection were Super Tuscans, and this kind of brings us full circle back to the Super Tuscans again. So it features producers like Sassicaia, Massetto, Celaya, Tignello, and Ornellaia. Some of the big names. Basically, as the collection name is Tuscan Legends, it's basically the big names that are Super Tuscan in the space. They always offer amazing value compared to certain regions that maybe have been more established over many years. And by value, I mean that quality of score to $2 ratio, but just like that available entry price point. So as people have discovered that over the past 20, 30 years, they've really been gaining traction as an investment category. And Tuscany, along with Piemonte, have become the top 2 superstars in the country.
Yeah. You want to just briefly on what Super Tuscans are, what that means?
Yeah. So originally, there were a couple of DOCs and DOCGs I guess DOCs in general, in the middle of Italy where Tuscany is. So there's Chianti, which now has Chianti and Chianti Classico, and a few other really broad areas that were basically governed on what the wine you could make. So the DOC is one of their regional areas of control. I can't remember the exact Italian. I think it's I can't remember the exact Italian. But moral of the story is it was pretty restrictive on what grapes could go into each wine. So you would basically say it had to be at least 85% Sangiovese, and it could have 15% of these white grapes that would be blended in. And that's just traditionally how the wine had been made for centuries, basically. And it was these field blends that they would just harvest and they just codified it. And in the early 60s, they really came to more the prominence. People had been messing around before, but they became commercially available in the 60s, that people decided to start making wines, one, either from 100% Sangiovese, which technically was outside of the rules. And then the more common Super Tuscans are the Merlot, Cabernet Sauvignon, a bunch of kind of French grapes, or what they call international varieties, being grown in the area. So they've started blending those with Sangiovese or making just pure Cabernet or Merlot blends. Not many pure Cabernet, but really blending in these different varieties. And that's why Americans actually gave them the name Super Tuscans, and it stuck. And since they were only originally commercially released in the 60s, they've been continually gaining traction throughout the decades. And they've become kind of a global favorite. And collectors now are being able to see how they perform with 30, 40, 50 years of age on them. And they're holding up really well to the stands of time. So they're really, again, gaining more momentum in the collector sphere.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of opportunities in this batch of offerings for folks to get involved across a diverse number of regions. So this is a great time to be starting your investment with Vin, even though collections are selling out very quickly. We certainly have a broad diversity of wines coming up, and also whiskeys, actually, and whiskeys in different formats from different producers as well. A lot of fun. Reach out to Billy or I if you'd like any more information on our upcoming offerings, but of course, we'll be announcing them via email if you've signed up on the platform. Yeah, we'd love to chat with you either way. Maybe moving into our interview, we've been going for a little bit now. We have a company that maybe folks on our podcast are familiar with. Pretty big wine in the space, maybe the most popular wine app in the US. Vivino, we have Boris Guillome, who is the senior manager, head of wine sourcing for US and Canada at Vivino. Vivino, a wine maybe indexing app like Yelp for wine, where folks can upload photos of their bottle that they've recently consumed, provide reviews and feedback on the wine. And you can also walk into a wine shop or pick up any wine that you have in your house, scan the label, and it will search the index and show you those reviews if you're trying to figure out what you're drinking. So Boris is the director of wine sourcing, and so he's bringing in the wines that Vivino sells on the marketplace side of their platform. So it's not only a great place to learn about wine and learn about the wines that you're drinking, especially when you're in the shop, but also a place to purchase wines.
Yeah. And that was something I'd known that Vivino was buying wines and offering them through their platform, and they have a network of retailers that offer that. But they're also working directly with producers and importing as well. And Boris, I think it might be because I think he's French, but
Guillaume.
Either way, Brady's pronunciation is always spot on. But he used to be literally, his title was director of like winery relations. So he has really deep ties to producers. So it's really interesting to hear that side, because most people really only know Vivino as a rating app, which is something I certainly used it for many years. And what's fun about the rating side of things too, though, we did get to ask him some questions. There was some global rankings that I've never really understood how they were created. He was able to shed light on that too. So really interesting interview.
Yeah, it's a great app for folks, whether you're just getting into wine and want to learn about what you're drinking night to night, or have been into it for a while and want to have a place maybe to catalog what you're drinking and what you think of it. It's definitely an awesome spot. And Vin, actually, we use it to send wine to some of our clients and friends and folks on the podcast we've sent wine to before. So it's a product that we use as well. So here's our interview with Boris. Hope you enjoy. Hey, Boris, thanks for joining us today. Really excited to have you on the podcast.
Good morning, gentlemen.
The sun is shining for you, as it is Billy, all the time in California. You're based in Napa, right? Is that what you said?
Yes, correct. You're lucky because obviously we've been having a lot of rain over the past 2 or 3 weeks, actually. But today I'm in my sunroom overlooking actually vineyards over there. And it is definitely a nice day. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, we've done a little bit of an introduction on your role at Vivino and some of your maybe past in wine, but could you go a little bit deeper into how you got into this space and how ultimately you ended up at Vivino?
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, as you can notice, I've got a slight French accent, and I was born in the Loire Valley. I first came in the US in 1995, so quite a while ago. I got a scholarship to come and study, and I stayed. And having a French accent, and I went to Spokane, Washington. If you guys are familiar with where that is, on the eastern side of the state. With a French accent, you sound very exotic very quickly. And I work as a waiter, and I was interested into pursuing my wine education after doing a business degree. And I did the WACT program. And shortly after I graduated, I got offered a position to run a wine shop from a local venture over there. I was 24, and I was like, hey, why not? So that's literally was my first intro into the wine world, aside from being a sommelier at the restaurant. And I work in many different aspects of the wine business. I work as a cellar master for a full year because I wanted to understand the process of making wine. And I moved to California in 2002 to work for a Grand Award restaurant called Restaurant 301. And I moved in Napa, which is where I'm located, in 2004. So just shy of 20 years ago. And initially I was the wine director for Dina De Luca. And I've obviously worked in different part of the valley, being in the wine business, selling wine mostly to an emerging market for about 10 years after that. And I've joined Vivino just about 6 years ago. and as their wine sourcing specialist, and I can explain a bit more about what that means. And it has definitely been a wild ride going to work for a startup, and a lot of challenges and a lot of reward knowing where we were when I first joined versus where we are today.
How long has
the product? Go ahead, Billy.
I was just going to say, how long has Vivino been existing?
Yeah, sorry. So Vivino's been in business for, I think it's about 11 years. And if you think about it, 11 years ago, I was still the start of the smartphone device, and we were one of the first wine app in Apple and such. And we went from this idea, which is the founders behind Vivino were born in Copenhagen, Denmark. And they don't necessarily have any wine background. Actually, they have no wine background, but one day they were facing a wall of wine at a local grocery store, and they say, hey, it would be kind of cool to know what people are thinking as opposed to just picking up a wine based on the packaging. And that was the idea of Vivino, and be able to take a snapshot of any wine label and see what the consumers would think based on the 5-star rating. And we went from obviously 0 to where we are today. And we have, again, it's growing every single month, but I think last time I checked, we have about 75 million people using the apps with another 500,000 people downloading the apps every single month, which actually, if you think about it, if you have an app that's 10 years old and you still have about 500,000 people joining every month, that's meant you obviously doing something right. And to give you guys an idea of what it means in terms of scans, so we have about 2 million scans each and every day. So that's about 20 to 25 scans every second throughout the world. So we have a lot of people using the app. Most people use the app to obviously get an idea of what their peers is thinking about a specific wine. And some of the people use the app to buy wine, which is obviously where I jump in terms of what I do for Vivino.
Wow.
Yeah, I think that I found the most use early on, especially in understanding more about producers when I see a label that I don't know. Also knowing what grape varieties are in a specific wine. Even sometimes now, if I'm not really sure what it is I'm looking at and the label isn't clear, it's really helpful to go on and be able to get some of that information as well, along with reviews and pricing and other things. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely something that's been, in my opinion, a must need in terms of the consumer reviews and know what people think, as opposed to just relying on the traditional critics, such as Robert Parker, James Suckling, Wine Spectator, and so on. And again, the idea is to help people to drink the right wines every single time by giving them ratings based on what other people are thinking of the wines, and trying to also match the wine that they're seeing on Vivino based on what they scan. The more active you are on Vivino, and the better the formula is for us to showcase some wines which we know you're interested in to that particular category.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it's interesting because the app has evolved. I've actually been using it for maybe eight years or so now. I was introduced by a friend of mine back in the day, and she would really just look at the very bottom there where you have the regional kind of percentages. What is this top 1% in France, 1% in Bordeaux? So that was kind of interesting that she would basically just pick a wine just on that, not even the stars. Could you elaborate a little bit more on like how the team determined to use a 5-star rating rather than the 100 points, and also what those percentiles mean? Because I still don't know to this day, but I still reference it occasionally.
Yeah, again, from the beginning, the idea behind Vivino was to use a 5-star rating, kind of very similar to what you may find in like Yelp, for example, for reviews, as opposed to a 100-point scale. Again, every single time that you raise a wine, it becomes the average for that particular wine, for that particular vintage, knowing that every single wine has a specific rating for each and every vintage. So, for example, you may be looking at a particular Napa Cabernet Sauvignon that's a 4.3 over all the vintages with, let's say, 2,000 or 3,000 ratings. And then you start to dig into each and every specific vintage, and you're going to see maybe it's a 4.2 for the 2018, and it's a 4.4 for the 2019, and so on. So it's dialed into each and every vintage. It's real time, meaning that the rating change all the time. Obviously, the more ratings you have, the least impact you have in terms of change. But you have that option. If you look at a 100-point scale, typical review made by someone that's obviously very seasoned, very knowledgeable about wine, that's great. But then again, it's a one review at a one specific time of one wine, as opposed to when you look at the ratings on Vivino, it is what everybody think combined at that very moment.
Yeah, I'd never thought of that actually. The fact that a reviewer tastes maybe the wine one time, often when it's very young, even with some of these. And then on Vivino, you get someone might taste a 2019 7 years from now and add their review, and you start to get a true aggregate.
Yeah. And again, I have nothing against the 100-point scale. I've been in business for 25 years and I've used it a lot to market wines myself. And it's still very much the go-to course for collectibles, for sure. But as you said, Brady, you're looking at one given time, and like a wine that sets a 96 point today, will that one still get 96 point a year from now? And it's not like the wines are being reviewed every single year to give you an update of how the wines change.
So what does the regional percentile piece mean at the bottom? Is that where, based on ratings on the Vivino app altogether?
Oh, you mean like the 1%?
Yeah, like the top 1%
So
of wines in the world. Yeah.
Yeah. So it means that like it's 1%, 2%, 5%, 10%. It means that, for example, if it's 1%, that's the specific one that you're looking at is among the 1% best rated wine for that particular category, which is, for example, Napa Valley Cab, and at a specific price point.
So it's within price point and region.
It is a combination of the price point and the category, meaning the wine region or the specific, like Napa Cabernet Sauvignon, Brunello. And so it's like the top of the top. Yeah.
Awesome.
That's awesome.
And one thing as well that because since you joined 8 years ago, and I'm not sure how active you are on Vivino, but aside from that percentage, we also have introduced, I think about a year and a half ago or 2 years, a percentage of, if you scan any wines on Vivino, not only is it going to give you the ratings, but it's also going to give you a percentage of how well that wine matches with your own specific profile. So for example, you're going to see a wine being a 89% match for you. And that means there's 89% chance that this is definitely something that you will enjoy. So it's something that's also people have been enjoying.
Awesome. Yeah, on that front, sorry, Brady, I think we have a little bit of a lag. Surprise. I have one more quick question there. So you were saying based on price point as well. I think it's interesting as you guys have transitioned more to being not just a ratings app, but an app where you can also buy wines either directly through Vivino or being connected through to another. And I think that obviously dives into what you do. Can you talk about how Vivino's kind of transitioned more towards allowing people to buy wine and what you do?
Yes, that's funny because every single day when I say, hey, I work for Vivino, people are, hey, we love the app, we use it all the time, blah, blah, blah. And when they say, so what do you do? I'm like, we're actually sourcing wine for our users. And they say, wait, what? You guys sell wines on? I'm always surprised of how many people are using the app, yet don't always understand that we actually have the option to purchase wines on Vivino, knowing that it is, when you look at the revenue, it is by far one of the very top e-commerce business in the country in terms of sales. We do a huge amount of sales. Again, when you have a huge pool of users, that's definitely a plus. We have different channels on how we sell wines on Vivino. So the traditional channel is you're going to scan a wine, and pending wine is available through one of our partnering merchants. One is hundreds of different merchants throughout the country that sign up to have their wine portfolio live on Vivino. Then you have the option to purchase it from one of these vendors, and it's always going to match you with the best price and the closest to where you are as well. So you're not buying, if you are like me based in California, you're not going to be buying it from someone in New York where the wine's going to be traveling throughout the entire country. So that's what we call the organic sales, meaning that people go scan and they purchase wine. And then we have the what we call the push notification program, where we select particular wines that we promote on a daily basis to specific users. And obviously, that's what I'm involved with myself, selecting these wines, negotiating the pricing with the suppliers, whether it's the winery direct, which is often the case, whether it's even direct imports, because we import a lot of wines from Europe, which are not in the US market, or sometimes it's through Russian as well. And these particular wines are sent to you based on a few things. Number one, they always going to have a superior ratings on it, meaning that it's often like a 4.2, 4.3, 4.4, which is obviously the top of the top. And they almost always going to show a value proposition, meaning there's going to be a discount built into the offer. And the idea is obviously to give people an incentive to purchase the wine at that given time. And you can look at somewhere between 30 to 50, sometimes even 60% off. And they're time sensitive, obviously. So it's a very typical flash sales model. And that's obviously a big chunk of the sales that we do through Vivino.
Are there some maybe particular challenges with sourcing wine? I'm sure there are challenges at sourcing wine at that volume, but also within that model. What are the particular challenges that you run into?
It is definitely a challenge because you are now buying wine in volume. So number one, you have to make sure there's enough volume to support the campaign, the sales. And then as I said, you have to build a pretty significant discount in order to create some reason for people to buy the wine. So that means that you have to negotiate the price and the cost accordingly. And we are obviously, one of the challenges always to come to an agreement with the winery as far as like, how do we find the right metrics for a price to be appealing for consumers? And that still makes sense for the wineries to offer, And the one thing that's always interesting, because the one question that sometimes people have is, hey, are you having challenges finding wineries that want to contribute to the program? As I mentioned, I'm based in Napa Valley, so that's by far number one region in terms of sales. And we've done deals with literally hundreds of wineries here. There's 90% of the wineries in Napa since I've been here, so 6 years ago, we've done some sort of deals.
Wow.
And the reason why is, with the exception of probably 5 to 10 wineries, like the screaming eagle of the world, everybody else is competing for a place at the dinner table. And there are an amazing amount of great wines produced throughout the world. But then again, you still have to compete and you still have to earn the trust of the consumers. And the best way to earn it is to say, hey, here's a price you cannot refuse to try my wine and see if you like it.
Are you seeing a lot of wineries using it as a channel to be introduced to the market or new markets? Or are you seeing more for market or brands that maybe have had some slowing down of sales, trying to revamp and reach new consumers?
Both, to be honest with you. There's always going to be wineries which have a excess of stock that they need to move, because either it's like, hey, we're getting close to bottling seasons or harvest season and we have some bills, and now we have probably twice as much stock that we want to, and therefore let's do a deal together. And then there's some wineries that obviously want to just get the marketing aspect. We've helped some wineries, actually, like a perfect example I can give you. 3 years ago, we had that reached out to us and said, hey, I'm representing a singer and is launching a rosé, and we love to be able to use Vivino, because the thing with Vivino is like, whether you are here in Napa Valley, in New York City, or in Wichita, Kansas, no matter where you are, you're going to have the marketing voice the same way. We ship wines throughout the entire country. So it's a very quick and efficient way to spread out the world to the right consumer as well. So that particular gentleman reached out to us and said, hey, so will you be interested into doing a combined Vivino and him doing like an Instagram post, say, hey, buy my wines on Vivino? And we did. And we sold somewhere like around 50,000 bottles in 24 hours of that particular wine.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. And we've had some other example of some wineries that are launching extension brands, meaning that they have a new product and they've used our services to introduce the wine to the market and see how it does.
Yeah, because it sounds like so much of your job is negotiating pricing and understanding consumer behavior around the pricing of some of these wines. What would you tell the average consumer? How would you help the average consumer navigate what price point to enter the wine market? Obviously, it's going to be different for everyone because we have different budgets, but what's the relationship to price and quality
So
in your mind?
for us, it's obviously we see a lot of the sales being between $20 to $50. That's the sweet spot for what we do. And again, as you said, the price, it's a very personal matter. For some people, $20 is a lot of money. And for some people, $50 is nothing. But we see a direct correlation between the price that we promote the wine for and the actual Vivino rating. So I know for a fact that, for example, again, using Napa Cabernet because that's the most active category for us. If I'm selling a Napa Cabernet for more than $35, for example, if it's not like a 4.3 or better, that's going to be probably a slow sell for us. As opposed to if it's a 4.4, 4.5, then it's going to be like flying off the shelf, so to speak. Yeah. And that's funny because it's not so much that we are trying to, of course, we want to advocate what we're doing, but when we first started to promote the wines, obviously we were saying, hey, that's a 4.3 Brunello, what this, and 95 point from the Wine Spectator or Gem Circling. So we were combining both to give a sense of a voice that will resonate with the most. And what we've noticed by doing hundreds of different offers is the core people that are using Vivino to buy wines are a lot more sensitive to the rating on Vivino versus the point. And there's some instances like, for example, I remember about a year ago, I purchased a wine from Chile, 95 point from a very famous press. And we were going to offer that for about $16 per bottle, which I was like, that's going to fly, no question. And it was only, so to speak, 3.7 stars out of 5. I was like, yeah, but that's going to be okay because the 95 points going to the 95 point plus the $16 promo price going to allow for the wine to just do really well. And it took us over a year to sell that particular wine. Nobody was buying it, as opposed to the same wine with no press, but like a 4.2, 4.3, we'll sell out in one day.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have the rating scale? I think that's really interesting because what does it matter what country you're in? Do you get a different rating for each wine? Because the American palate's so different than the French palate.
That's interesting because the ratings is global. No matter where you are, as soon as you start to rate a particular wine, then your rating becomes part of the average. Whether you are here based in California or if you are in Europe or anywhere in the world, actually. So it is definitely a global rating, yeah. And it does play a little bit of an impact on the overall rating because I've noticed that especially like being French myself, I see sometimes some of the ratings in France are slightly lower than the ratings in the US, even though people say, hey, amazing wine, I love it, 3.5. As opposed to someone here may say, hey, the one is pretty good, 4.0. So it's very interesting how that works. And the best way I can describe it is in France, when you like something, you don't say, oh, that's good. You say, oh, that's not bad. C'est pas mal. So I think it's where the culture plays part into the overall rating. Yeah.
It's really interesting. Yeah, I found myself that, especially, for instance, if it's a Napa Cab with a lot of ratings and it's at 4.4, which is it seems like difficult threshold for the wine to get above if it has a lot of ratings. If it's at 4.4, I imagine that it's very much a wine that maybe is appealing to like American palate. Whereas if it gets into 4.7 or 4.8, you really start to think of it as obviously incredibly exceptional. Or if it's a 4.0 from a good producer, that also makes me think that it's probably maybe more complex or appealing to maybe more of a European palate or something like that in different ways. That's obviously generalizations, but that's how I began to relate to some of those scores.
Yeah, you're right. Obviously, the culture of the American palate versus someone from Italy or from France or Spain is going to be a little bit different, correct? Yes. But that's the same when you look at, in my opinion, when you look at the regular press, they tends to favor the 96 to 100 point Napa cabs. And keep in mind that I test hundreds of wines, if not thousands of wines every single year. And I've done that for now 20 years in Napa. So I've had a chance to try a lot of wines. And I noticed that often the big score wines are the one with a big slap on your face that they're really like, oh, wow, that's big. That's.
Yeah, I think the trend, luckily, is going away from pure concentration and body to balance, which is nice, at least in the macro score. But I was going to ask, speaking of different countries, I know you had mentioned that you were looking to, or at least in the last year, you had the necessity to bring in more international wines to the U.S. market. How do you go about sourcing wines from different countries that you think might appeal here, and then vice versa, bringing wines elsewhere?
Yeah, so actually the good thing about Vivino, as I said, it's a global company. We have someone doing my job in France, in Spain, in Italy. So first of all, I have this track record of which particular French wines are doing well in Europe or Italian wines. So that's given me a pool of wine that I can acquire myself for the US market. And then obviously I have my own network of wineries that I've either met a long time ago. Some of them I may have met at some wine fair, like I'm going to Paris next month for Vinexpo Paris, going to Provine, which is the biggest fair in the world, in March. The idea is for me to use Vivino to find wines with superior ratings, which may not be highly exposed to the US market, and to just bring them and offer that kind of sense of exclusiveness to our customers, And we, as you mentioned, Billy, historically we were doing a lot more domestic wines than imports in terms of sales, especially on the offers program. And we've seen that trend changing over the past year. And the reason why, as you guys know, we've been experiencing a lot of fire seasons in Napa Valley. The worst of the worst was 2020, which many wineries did not produce any wine in 2020 as a reason of the fire. And even though there's a lot of winery that I've worked with for 6 years and every year we redo their offer, there's some wineries that say, hey, sorry, but we don't have any 2020 vintage. We're afraid of running out. Therefore, we don't know if we want to be able to sell any volume to you guys for 2022, which was last year. And I knew that right off the bat, like literally a year ago, like in January, February, I knew that I was going to be short in terms of my supplies for domestic wines. So what I did, I started to push more the imports and trying to match the profiles. For example, someone that's drink a lot of ripe, very fleshy Napa cabs, I'm like, hey, why don't we try to introduce them to some Amarone from Italy? Because this is, even though the wines are very different, I think people are going to have that same profile. So we've done a lot more imports last year. Literally, we doubled our imports program in 2022. And it's funny because when I talk to the wineries, I look at the long-term situation and I say, hey, just be careful, because if you don't give us any wine this year, it's not a big deal. But I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to hold a space for you for your wine next year, because if we get some imports that actually are going to be performing well, I might be more inclined to redo the imports versus going back to your winery. And that's literally what I've seen over the past 2 or 3 months. I've seen a lot more wineries coming back to me, say, hey, we're ready to participate again. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. But unfortunately, I don't have as much spots for domestic wines as I used to have a year and a half ago.
Yeah, it's really funny you mentioned Amarone. I was actually just chatting with a member of our investor community yesterday, who's also a listener to the podcast, so he'll recognize this, but he's a Vivino user, but he just discovered Valpolicella Ripasso wines. And He was saying he's a big Napa fan, and he was saying how that was a great parallel, a great value. And he's like, I'm so surprised I had never heard of this before. I think there's a lot of those types of regions that is, even in the European market, maybe like Great Britain, who have a predisposed kind of opinion on, say, Valpolicella. When you bring them to America, so many people are not exposed to Valpolicella baseline, much less all of the different styles, Amarone or Ripasso. So I think that's a really interesting way to not only educate, but provide value.
Yeah. And the one thing that I found to be a huge plus for the US market is Americans as a whole are a lot more prone to explore new wines, new region than I've seen in Europe. I grew up in France where you don't just drink French wines. You actually drink either Bordeaux because your dad drink Bordeaux, or you drink Burgundy because your dad drink Burgundy, and you almost don't even cross in between the two main regions, And again, here I think that people are a lot more welcoming to new style, new regions. And as you said, the goal for us is to help to increase. We've done extremely well over the past 2 years with Portuguese wines, which in my opinion, and I'm not talking of obviously port like the desert or sweet wine. I'm talking of non-sweet, regular red and whites. And the wines are just doing incredibly well. Like we bring the wines, they are usually pretty, I wouldn't say inexpensive, but they are in the lower tier of our pricing. And people love them. You get a lot of 4.3, 4.4. And yeah, so that's definitely been a trend for us. And I think that's going to only increase with inflation. And people always say, hey, are you worried about the economy and inflation and the impact? And like, yes, guess what? If anything, people drink more during a hard time, but in the same time, they do lower their pricing in terms of their average ticket. So yes, people who drink wines into the 30 might be more moving into 20 to 25 and et cetera, et cetera. And the one thing with what we do, as I said, the toughest part for me is to negotiate the price, because then I don't need to tell you the wine is great. You can just look at the Vivino ratings. And if you see $20 Portuguese red with a 4.4 and 250 ratings, that's pretty spectacular anyway.
Yeah, we've talked obviously a lot about your main focus in the business, which is this probably category below $55. Is that right?
Yeah, correct. It is. I always say $18 to $40 is definitely
okay.
We have wines for lower, and we want to actually further increase our low tier pricing, because that's still what people the most when they go to a grocery store. The one thing that's a bit of a challenge for us is we cover shipping for the orders as long as you buy 6 bottles, and you can mix and match any wines you want. So for example, you can buy one bottle at $50 and 5 bottles at $10, and you still get shipping covered. That's a nationwide shipping, and on average we ship between the time that you place the order to the time you get your wine, it's about 2 or 3 days. So it's a very fast shipping process. But the cost is pretty substantial, especially when you start to look at wine that you sell for under $15. Sure. My cost of shipping is often higher than the cost of the wine itself.
Yeah. Yeah, I wanted to try and pivot a little bit maybe towards your perspective on how the business handles partners who sell higher end wines as well. Mm-hmm. Like I'm looking here is a bottle of, what vintage is this? A 2016 Lafite, and it looks like there are 3 different merchants at very different price points that have it available here that you can buy through Vivino. I'm just curious, the juxtaposition between maybe that side of the business and selling $800,000-$900,000 plus bottles versus the side that you're primarily focused on at 40.
So the funny thing about what we do, as I say, when we do offers, they are very much catered to your particular profile. And again, I think we have about on average, 40% open rates on the offers we send, which is huge when you think that we send millions of offers every month. And it's going to be anywhere from, as I said, I wouldn't say $10 because that's almost impossible for us, but let's say $12 to $15 entry level European wines, all the way to Chateau Lafite or the first growth from Bordeaux, Screaming Eagle. We sell Screaming Eagle as well. So the only thing is, when we send an offer on a ultra premium wine, like whether it's Chateau Lafite, whether it's a Screaming Eagle or Scarecrow, all of these collectible wines, it's going to go to a very small pool of users. And the plus sign is, again, I can go on Vivino, I can select US customers, I can see whoever has ever scanned a first growth Bordeaux, and that's give you right away what's the right audience for that particular wine. Because you don't want to show a Chateau Lafite to someone that didn't even know that there's wine or above $100 anyway.
Is that a pretty substantial part of your business, that
it is,
like working with partner merchants who are selling wines at that price point?
So it's a growing part for sure. When it comes to the offers, meaning that we we source this particular wine, they always do well. And sometimes when you look at wine like Screaming Eagle, it's not a price issue. It's a matter of like, how can you find enough wines? Because many times retailers who offer Screaming Eagles may have like 1 or 2 6-pack. Actually, it's a 3-pack available. And for us, we have to have enough wine to justify sending an offer to at least a few hundred people anyway. But it is a growing part. And I think it tells us that we have customers going from the everyday buyer all the way to someone looking for collectible wine.
Have you seen, I guess that'll help us kind of transition into the idea of what kind of other trends did you see during 2022 and are you looking to in consumption for 2023? Are you thinking they're going to go more affordable this year? Are you thinking, and I also have a secondary question on the kind of the Portuguese wine note got me thinking is, personally, I've noticed over the 5-10 years of wine consumers pivoting away from being so particular about variety and varietal-based wine. So I've heard less, at least among my friends, of I don't need a Chardonnay, I don't need a Cab. Do you have an interesting red? And they don't really care about the varieties that are in it as long as it tastes.
Correct.
Are you seeing that? Yeah.
Yeah. Obviously, the lower the price point and the more people are willing to explore new style, it's a lot easier to introduce a Portuguese white if you sell it for $16.99 versus $30. And yes, to answer your first question, I'm expecting to see the average price on Vivino for the bottle to go down this year because, again, we are going through a bit of a financial hard time in the country in terms of inflation and the buying power for wine may not be as strong as it may have been at another time. So right now, I'm doing a lot of preparation for importing some, again, French, Italian, Spanish, and Portuguese wines at the below $20 price point, because I know that's going to be a big category for us. In the same time, we still see, if the rating is there, we still see a strong demand on our offers for any wines that's got like a 4.3, 4.4 anyway. Yeah.
Go ahead, Billy.
I was just going to say, one thing that's been stuck in my head a little bit for a few years now is the issues with shipping wine from overseas here, importing wine, I guess you would call it. The time it takes. During the pandemic, it got to be extremely long. Are those lead times getting a little more normal? How long does it take to get wine over here?
Yeah, obviously that became quickly a nightmare last year. On average, usually you get I'm going to select some wines from Europe. I'm going to work with an importer to bring it. And within 60 to 75 days, I'm going to get the wines landing in either East Coast or West Coast for us. And at the peak of the last year, when there was like no containers available, that was literally twice as long. And one of the issues with this is when you negotiate deals, you obviously negotiate a price and terms. And we got to a situation where our partners, because another thing I forgot to mention, which I should probably mention. So Vivino is a marketing platform. And even though my role is to help to negotiate pricing for our offers, I do it on behalf of our retail merchants. We don't have a retail license on purpose, because if we did, then we could not market. We couldn't be a marketing company. So when I negotiate wines, I'm negotiating on behalf of a retailer that's agreed for me to negotiate a price for them. But we got to a situation with the import process where we had to pay in advance before the wines landed in our warehouse. So that was a bit of a challenge. Obviously, knock on wood, but things look better this year. The price went down as well because the price of shipping it tripled literally. It was stupid.
Wow.
But the one thing that saved us was the conversion of euro versus US was also going down. It went as down as 1.03, I think. Now it's about 1.10. Historically, it's more like around 1.2. So obviously, if you gain 10% on your conversion rate, that's 10% extra on the cost that you can save.
Yeah. And regarding domestic shipping, the new program that honestly, I guess it's not even wines that are only like domestic, but the program that you now have, the Vivino Pro, or what is this?
Oh, the Vivino Plus.
Vivino Plus, I'm sorry about that. That's really incredible. $5 a month, free shipping on any orders. That even for me, has been really huge. There's been some wines that I haven't been able to find anywhere else. So for instance, I think recently I ordered an English sparkling that I was looking for, and there was like 2 bottles at a partner merchant on Vivino. And because I had Plus, I could just get that 1 bottle. And like you said, comes in 2 to 3 days. I think that's massive for the.
So we introduced Vivino Plus in the last quarter of 2022. So it's still something very new to us. And again, the idea, just to recap for your audience. So you pay $5 every month. It's on a repeat bill. And you get your shipping covered regardless of how many bottles you purchase. So you can buy just 1 bottle of wine for $10 and you're going to get it within 2 or 3 days, as you mentioned, and you don't pay shipping. Obviously, the idea behind this is to create some customers' loyalty and make them come back and purchase more wines. Another thing with Vino Plus is you also have access to special offers, which are either in advance of our standard customers, or sometimes we don't have enough of that particular product. Therefore, we only make it available to our Vivino Plus members. But literally at $5, I'm not here to sell you the program, but it's a no-brainer. You will pay more in shipping than you will by just joining the membership.
Yeah, no, I'll sell it myself to our listeners. It's definitely worthwhile if you purchase wine more than once a month. I'm having a case shipped and I'm on the East Coast, but I'm having a case shipped from California, and it's $60. It's $5 a bottle in the case, basically added to the price. And so the fact that I can look on here and, my closest merchant is in DC and I'm in Baltimore, I know I'm going to get it very quickly, and it makes sense that that deal would be available. It's great for that kind of customer. This is all. I really like hearing your perspective on the markets and like consumer behaviors and things like that. Is there anything else that kind of stands out as we head into this year of just like emerging trends in the category, or maybe regions that you're looking to expand more into? I know we talked about bringing in some more imports as part of the programming, but just anything that you want to wrap up with as that you're looking forward to in those trends in 2023?
So definitely more imports for sure. And not just from Europe, we also do really well with South American. I was able to find a lot of Argentinian Malbec for a price that's really attractive. And that's another category that does well. And what's interesting about what we do is we have to follow the trend. And that's easy because we have the scans every single day. I can see what people are scanning, and it gives me a trend of what are the category of wine people. And we're talking of 2 million scans per day. So it's a lot of data. And so I can track and see what style are people scanning. And therefore, by scanning, they're probably interested in that price point, that category of wine. And that's very useful. That's something that nobody has. That data on customers is second to none. And what's interesting as well is to see how we can influence the trend as well, because we have such a large outreach with our campaigns, our offers, that sometimes we can put specific wines or specific wine regions on the map. Like we'll do, as I mentioned, either Portuguese red or a Argentinian Malbec, and suddenly we're going to see the trend on that 2 categories being like very strong.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah, I look forward to seeing more wines from, like you said, South America, and from maybe regions that are making wines, even sometimes in a very similar style to what maybe when we talk about the U.S. consumer really likes, but at a really attractive price point, like you said. I think that's great.
And another one of our projects for this year is also to work closely. I'm here in Napa Valley myself and trying to bring as much, aside from the offers we do, to try to connect the dots between our users and the wineries by having their wines available through us any given time, because we use a couple of fulfillment centers here in Napa Valley, and we can quickly and efficiently send wines throughout the entire country, no problem.
Yeah, we will share a lot more, and we'll share some links for folks to be able to find Vivino easily in the show notes and stuff like that, and in our introduction with you. But really appreciate you coming on to share more about your specific role there, but also some of the really cool things I think that companies doing for consumers. That definitely, I think, will resonate with our listeners. So we appreciate it.
Yeah, no, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. We'll talk again soon, hopefully maybe at the end of this year, and see what trends are happening next.
Nice, appreciate your time. Have a nice day.
Thanks, Boris.
All right. That was our interview with Boris Guillome. I hope you guys got some insights onto how some of your ratings are produced and maybe a new platform to discover and buy some new wines. But also, I hope you guys are excited for our Tuscan Legends collection that will be coming out tomorrow as a publication of this podcast. And that would be February, I will tell you for sure, February 23rd, 2023. So get excited for this Tuscan Legends, and we are excited to have new collections for you and a new podcast for you next week. Cheers.
To check out our current offerings and to sign up for the Vint platform, find us at www.vint.co. That's www.vint.co. For questions, comments, or feedback on the Vint podcast, please email us at support@vint.co. Vint and VV Markets are offering securities pursuant to Regulation A. Our offering circular as amended can be found on the SEC website. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. Investments such as those on the Vint platform are speculative and involve substantial risks to consider before investing. We may provide communication that may contain certain forward-looking statements that are subject to various risks and uncertainties. Information provided in any communications, including this podcast, is not legal, business, or tax advice. All prospective investors should consult a legal, tax, or business advisor concerning the subject matter of any communications and any offering.